After avoiding a fourth straight loss, the Sooners managed to get past the Jayhawks and head into the bye week. We're about halfway through the season, and it's time to review some things. We'll get into that here in just a moment. You're listening to the Mainline Podcast. I'm Adam Jacquez alongside my co-hosts Tyler Burton and Corbin Polson. Guys, how are we feeling tonight?
Cold. Woke up 36 degrees in Oklahoma this morning. So yeah, winter's definitely here. Fall is over. But yeah, feeling good, guys. Back in the win column.
I mean, I don't think fall is over, but sure. I don't think it got that cold here in Colorado, but it's been a beautiful fall out here. So winter's not arrived, I guess, in the colder state. So sounds about right.
Go Avs, though, right?
Go Avs.
Go
nice
Avs.
win last night, boys.
6-3. 6-3. Might be going checking out a couple games pretty soon, Corbin.
Can't wait, man. I got half season tickets, so I have a few extra for you.
There we go. There we
Nice.
go. God, Corbin and I on good terms on a podcast. Man, this truly is something special.
Enjoy it while it lasts.
But yeah, you're right, Adam. Great to see this Oklahoma football team bounce back in a big way, get the W. I think that this team and this coaching staff showed a lot of resilience and mental toughness to come back home after three straight losses, getting embarrassed in Dallas, losing 49-0 against your arch rival. Put together, I think, what was their best performance since the Nebraska game. It was great to see. And guys, we're 7 weeks into the season. This bye week comes at an absolute perfect time. We're 4-3. It's always better to go into a bye week off of a win as opposed to a loss. Get in the film room, take care of your body, get some extra work and prep done on Iowa State, and just try to mentally prepare yourself for this last 5-week stretch because it's going to be a grind to close out Big 12 play.
Man, guys, what a difference a weekend makes. Doom and gloom the past few weeks. Just praying that you don't get blown out at home by Kansas. Now all of a sudden you come out with a win and you look at the schedule: Iowa State, Baylor, West Virginia, Bedlam, Tech. At least 4 of those I'm like, I can see a win. Don't know that we're going to get it, but I can see it. So going to be really interesting down the stretch, guys. But what could have been if the Sooners lose to Kansas at home and the chaos that would have ensued after that, we don't have to worry about anymore. So at least for a couple weeks, we get to be happy. And I guess kind of an upset. I know we were favorites, but kind of an upset rankings wise at home against Kansas. Who would have thought?
I was definitely impressed with the mentality because, you come off some really bad losses, 3 in a row, 2 by where you're giving up, over 40 points easily in both games. And I think the fans were a little bit overreactionary. I was telling my wife on my way down to Norman Saturday morning, it was like, yeah, I think we're just overreacting a little bit too much to that OU Texas game where OU had no ammo really to throw on offense. And it felt like the coaching almost was out of ideas, or maybe even potentially just kind of threw that game at a certain point because they're like, what are we going to do really? But the team responded really well. It looked like that confidence was fully back on offense. And I think it did help the defense a little bit as well. And the offense, executed early and often to take that pressure off the defense so that even though the game was tied in the first quarter, even though OU only held a lead by 7 points at certain points, it felt like almost like, it feels like you're not too worried about things.
Yeah, it's amazing how not just the performance of the football team, but the overall psyche and the confidence level of this OU squad this past weekend, how it just kind of seemed to take it to that next level when you've got a fully functioning quarterback that's able to run the offense and complete a pass longer than 10 yards, guys. Wow. What a difference it makes having Dylan Gabriel back as opposed to what we saw for the last 6 quarters with Davis Bevel. So really good stuff from Dylan Gabriel. I think that as a football team right now, obviously, all of your goals are out the window at this point right now. You're not making the college football playoff. Chances are, I think we have like a less than 5% chance. All hell would have to break loose for OU to get the 2 slot in the Big 12 championship game. But I think at this point right now, you're 4-3. You're going into the bye week. Yes, the last 5 weeks of the season are going to be very, very tough. With, like you said, Corbin, I could see Oklahoma finding a way to go 5-0. I could also see it just as easily them going 0-5. So that's the nature of the beast playing in the Big 12 this year with the team that Oklahoma's got right now. But yeah, very, very excited about it. It's going to be a lot of fun to see. And I think that even though all of your big goals are out the window at this point, I think that Brent Venables and this coaching staff keeping this team together, like what we saw over the last 7 days in Norman, continuing to build the culture, install their systems, get the young guys more and more snaps, coming into a bye week. We saw Robert Spears Jennings get a lot of snaps over the course of the game against Kansas. Young guys using this opportunity over the next 7 days, get some more reps, get some more time in the film room. I think Oklahoma is in a good spot right now going into the back half of the season.
Definitely. And I guess, I don't know, do you guys have anything else really specific to the Kansas game? Because I think once we get into kind of a mid-year review, I think that's where we'll probably want to live and discuss mostly. Do you guys have anything else as far as the Kansas game that you're wanting to uncover?
I don't think so.
No. Okay.
No, I don't think so.
So let's take this. I wanted to kind of recap. We're a little bit more than midway through, 7 games in the books already for the Sooners. Not exactly how we expected things to go. Although a lot of people said 9-3. That's still possible. It seems unlikely, but still possible. But let's take a look back and just kind of give some. I don't want to give it necessarily like a grade because that's kind of boring. But let's talk about Dylan Gabriel first here. He has played in, I guess, about 5.5 games because of the injuries so far. He's on track, and I hate to be the on pace guy because you don't know what he's going to look like against, continued higher competition, but he's on track for about 3,000 yards, 25 touchdowns, only 1 interception that happened this past Saturday against Kansas, which some say may or may not have been his fault. It's unclear who, misread that particular route. And then rushing wise, he's actually 6 yards away from his all-time high in a particular season already. So as it stands today, what do you guys think as far as Dylan Gabriel's performance? Above expectations, below expectations, or possibly even on par?
Slightly below. I don't think I was quite as high on him as some others. I thought he would be a really good quarterback. I think I feel different about him now than I did 3 weeks ago, if you want my honest opinion. I think the Kansas game helped. Seeing what happened down in Dallas without him helps. But if you look at him just for him, not what he necessarily means for the team, I'd say he's just below probably what I expected. Still plenty of opportunity there, especially in the K-State game, early on in the TCU game, where plenty of throws to be had, didn't hit them. The game kind of went sideways from there. So, I'd say just below what I thought he would be.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna sit on the fence with this, and I think that the expectations that I had for Dylan Gabriel coming into the season, I think that he's kind of played up to what I expected. Obviously, there's been a lot of times where he's missed some throws. The consistency hasn't been there, maybe quite like what we've expected, but also at the same time, we didn't have a chance to watch a ton of UCF football over the last couple of years. Watching play on a game-by-game basis, we're spoiled with the quarterback play that's been here in Norman over the last 5 to 6 years. But, just looking at his stats halfway through the season, completing 65% of his passes, just a hair over 1,600 passing yards. He's missed 1 game. I guess he's technically missed a game and a half, 13 touchdowns, 1 interception. Guys, if you would have told me that Dylan Gabriel would be completing close to 70% of his passes, 13 scores to just 1 turnover, and this Oklahoma football team would, be averaging 5 yards a carry collectively on the ground, I would think that, okay, Oklahoma's probably sitting here at 7-0, maybe 6-1. But there's been a lot of things that have impacted this Oklahoma football team and have impacted Dylan Gabriel outside of his control. So as far as expectations, I think he's met them, but there's definitely a lot of room to improve. And I think that the game against Kansas on Saturday, where he threw for over 400 yards and a couple of scores, I thought that was his best game of the season.
For me, I think he's slightly exceeding expectations, mainly because I've been impressed with the way he's been able to lead this offense. He doesn't look like he's outmanned in a Power 5 program like a lot of Group of 5 quarterbacks do once they move up to that next level. So I've been very impressed with that, his leadership. I don't think he's necessarily missed wide open guys very often in terms of just not throwing it to them. He's usually, seeing that guy and making a throw, whether it's, generally on target, but sometimes it's not completely off. So my expectations maybe were a little bit lower than maybe other people coming into the year, just knowing that he came from a Group of 5 program. So maybe that's where I get the slightly above expectations. I did think in a weird way, like the concussion kind of helped him with this fan base so much because we had the opportunity to see what was behind him. And he went from, I think, what would have been the most underappreciated quarterback since Landry Jones to one guy that I think people will actually respect and love a lot more once his time in Norman is wrapped up. We'll see how next year goes because there's going to be a big time freshman behind him. But I think overall the perception has changed dramatically over the last 3 weeks for obvious reasons.
You think he's more underappreciated than Jalen?
I don't know. Jalen is kind of I feel like he's getting more props because he's been even better in the NFL than he was in Norman in some ways.
Sure.
I'm kind of giving Dylan Gabriel the LeBron James comparison from a standpoint of basically from the time that LeBron has been in the league, starting with the Cleveland Cavaliers all the way through his time with the Heat and now with the LA Lakers. If LeBron's on the team, for 95% of the seasons that he's played in the NBA, they've been the 1 or the 2 seed. You take LeBron James off of that team, then that team is fighting for a playoff spot, probably not even reaching the playoffs. So I think that if there's one thing that we can compare this with Dylan Gabriel, we saw how dark and gloomy it can get when Dylan Gabriel is not a part of this football team. When Dylan Gabriel is out there playing quarterback for OU, they can win they have a chance to win every single game that they play on their schedule. If he's not, I don't think Oklahoma wins a football game the rest of the year, maybe against any other Power 5 opponent. So, yeah, you guys are shaking your head right now.
What a take.
Who's Dwayne Wade on this team?
I guess the point that I'm making is LeBron James,
Irving?
LeBron's value to his team over the course of his career. I would make that same comparison right now with Dylan Gabriel. When he's on the field playing well, this team's on fire. When he's not a part of the action, this is not a very good team in college football.
It's like I was saying. I'm glad we enjoyed that moment at the beginning of the podcast, Tyler. It's gone. Comparing
that's not a fair comparison. Talking about how valuable he is to his team, you can make the argument he's the most valuable player to his team in college football.
Yeah, but I think there are a lot of valuable players you could have gone with. Instead, you went for probably arguably the best player in NBA history in LeBron James. So I don't think what you're saying is wrong. The comparisons where it's a little question.
I'm not talking about from a talent standpoint. I'm talking about in terms of the value of said player to his team. So
thanks for clarifying.
Well, maybe you guys will agree on this one as far as what your opinion is of Jeff Lebby so far. Jeff Lebby was a guy that came to Norman that I think a lot of people thought was possibly the best offensive coordinator in the country. Of course, we're not talking about guys that are also acting as head coaches like Ryan Day or Lincoln Riley.
He's the LeBron James of offensive coordinators. Just want to specify.
But everyone was super excited about him. I know there were some people that were wondering, did Lane Kiffin handle most of that offense at Ole Miss? And Jeff Lebby's coming to Norman, and he had a great outing this past Saturday. 710 yards. It was 715 against Kansas. It was the second highest total since 2018 in a conference game for the Sooners. So he's had some really good moments. I think he's also frustrated some OU fans. But do you guys think that we got the best available offensive coordinator?
Yes. Not even close.
Who else would be on that list?
I have no clue, to be
honest. You think about some of the best offensive minds in the game of college football. They're all head coaches. Lincoln Riley, Ryan Day, Josh Heupel right now at Tennessee with what he's doing at Hendon Hooker. Yeah. I mean, in terms of an offensive coordinator, you're probably hard-pressed to find one.
Yeah. I think for me, what I like about his offense so much is it is pretty simple. There's lots of guys that are schemed to be wide open. We saw the short passing game this past Saturday that was really an extension of the run game. The only complaint that I really have is I would like to see more running of the ball from the actual running backs. Seems to be plenty of dry spells where it's pass, quarterback run, pass, and we don't see the tailbacks involved nearly as much as I would like, especially when you are often going to have the better talent on the offensive line, the better running backs. I would like to see him strategically use the running game to help out that defense a little bit more than he currently is. But I think overall, I like the way that offense looks. It doesn't seem like it's too overly complicated in comparison to what Lincoln Riley was running.
Let's take a quick look at the stats, though, because I think, Adam, I see what you're seeing, but I think the stats say something different. Because if you look at the Kansas game, even taking away Gabriel's runs, and I guess you've got Stoops in there for 2 runs, Braden Willis for a run, so take away 13 runs, and it's basically 50-50 in passing to rushing attempts.
Yeah, I would like it to be more like 60-40.
But is 701 yards of total offense not good enough? I mean, 52 points.
300 yards rushing.
It's nitpicky, but you look at the way that game started, and maybe it was to give Dylan Gabriel, confidence, but there wasn't a tailback carry, I think, until like right there at the very end of that first drive at the goal line. You look at the TCU game when he was still in at quarterback, there was a stretch where I think over 2 drives, a running back did not get a carry. It just feels like that if your offense is humming like it is against Kansas, you kind of get away with it. It's fine. You're just doing whatever you want. But then there's other scenarios like against K-State where you go 3 and out really quickly, very early. You don't take any time off the clock, and your defense has to run back out there, and that can really hurt you and shoot you in the foot in a sense if you aren't running the ball, a little bit more at the beginning and not going through dry spells without running back carries, in my opinion.
I think that's what that's kind of the give and take you have to have.
Take the
with
good
Levy's
with the bad.
Offense, though, yeah. I mean, you could run the ball and you could get stuffed, for minus 2 yards, rush for 3, and you're like, why didn't we pass? So
I want it to be perfect.
Yeah, well, we have gotten used to perfect a lot around here, but I don't think that's something that you can expect every season, unfortunately.
Well, I'm just glad that we didn't fire Jeff Lebby after the 49-0 performance with Davis Belleville going 6 of 12 for 38 yards, like a lot of OU fans wanted them to happen. There might be one on this podcast that was not impressed with what Jeff Lebby has had to do. But guys, it's amazing what happens when your starting quarterback is healthy. It's amazing how much easier it is as an offensive coordinator calling plays when your offensive line is playing the best brand of football that we've maybe seen in Norman since 2020 or maybe even 2019, go a little bit further back. But I think that the proof's kind of in the pudding right now. Once you do have a healthy Dylan Gabriel, once you do have a dominant offensive line that is playing extremely well, Eric Gray has looked the best that he ever has in an Oklahoma uniform over the past 3 weeks of the season. And Marvin Mims, 16 targets in one game. Adam, I think you were the one that put that tweet out. When getting the ball to your best players, making that a focus, that makes your job as a play caller so much easier when you've got the amount of skill talent that Oklahoma does. Now, is Oklahoma going to be able to put up 700 yards on every opponent on the rest of the schedule? No, there's going to be a little bit more difficulty going up against these last 5 opponents. I don't think that there's one bad defense left on the schedule, maybe outside of Texas Tech, but we'll see how Oklahoma goes on the road and plays. But I guess the bottom line, guys, is, what Jeff Lebby is doing with the cards that he was dealt with Dylan Gabriel as his quarterback. I think that he's done an extremely good job in the limited time that he's been on campus here in Norman. Once he gets, Jacquez Petaway, Anthony Evans, Jackson Arnold, some of the other guys that are coming in, his guys are going to be able to run his scheme even better than, what's currently on campus right now. I think that things are going to get even bigger and brighter for Oklahoma. So yes, Jeff Lebby is one of the best offensive minds in football, and Oklahoma did a damn good job in hiring him away from Ole Miss.
We may be back to fire Lebby depending on how this Iowa State game goes, because Iowa State's probably the best defense this team's going to face, potentially all year. Been giving up a season high of 31 against Baylor, 24 against Texas, 10 against K-State, 14 against Kansas. Pretty salty, guys. Those are some pretty good numbers on the board. I'm curious, though, because I think all of us heading into the season when considering Dylan Gabriel, it seemed very apparent that this was a one-year guy who was going to head the NFL after the season's done. I think everybody kind of thought that was his plan. What percentage at this point in the season, and obviously a long way to go that could change things, at this point in the season, what percentage do you have him coming back for next season?
95.
Yeah.
Do you think
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I feel like he needs more tape, and the quarterback class of Sam Hartman, of Hendon Hooker, of
Bryce Young,
DTR, CJ Stroud. Like, there's just names after name after name of guys that are probably going to be draft picks. And Dylan Gabriel, is he better than any of those guys? I'm not sure.
No.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah. Another note on Jeff Lebby that kind of flows into our next point here that we wanted to ask was about Brent Venables' in-game coaching. He's allowed Jeff Lebby to go for 16 fourth down attempts. So use only about 500 on those attempts. But that was a curious question that we had coming into the season was, how will Brent allow that, those fourth down attempts that Ole Miss was known for? He seems to let it happen pretty often. He trusts Lebby in that play calling. But overall, Brent Venables as an in-game coach, so many unknowns. How have you guys felt about his performance in the game so far?
I've honestly been pretty okay with it. I mean, just going back as recently as, the right before halftime against Kansas, Oklahoma going for it on the 4th and goal. I understand, fans wanting to kick it in that situation, make it a 3-possession game with Kansas getting the ball coming out of halftime. But I love the aggressiveness that Brent Venables coached with on Saturday, going for it on 4th and goal. Guys, 1, that shows confidence in your offensive line. But 2, that sends a message to your football team that, we're going to line up and try to deliver the knockout punch right here before halftime, go up 3 scores. And really, back Kansas into a corner. So I think that if you really wanted to, really wanted to dive deep down into it. If you did have any, if we could sit here and complain about, some of the in-game coaching, yes, I think that you maybe could highlight some of the personnel changes that maybe we would have wanted to see, especially in some games where, either the game's out of hand or there's a certain player that's getting beat or is missing tackles nonstop that the other team's picking on him. So I would say that maybe from a personnel standpoint, might have a bone to pick with some of the things that BV's done, but outside of that, I mean, it's year one. You're playing with the cards you're dealt. He's doing what he has to do to win football games, and we'll see how that continues.
Yeah, I wouldn't say much different. I think if anything, over these past 3 weeks, I think we've realized the lack of potential talent that's really on this team and what he's having to deal with. So even though that we can look back and say, maybe you should have played this guy or that guy, I think it's a pretty raw roster. And so unfortunately, he's just, as Tyler mentioned, kind of playing the cards he was dealt. So as long as the season can be salvageable, he can save this recruiting class. I think this is more of a conversation for year 2, year 3. What does that look like when he's got a little bit more of his roster put together, and most likely, again, holding together this recruiting class, most likely more talented rosters coming.
It does feel like he's had his hands tied behind his back in the last couple of weeks, but the first 3 weeks of the year, we were big fans of the adjustments that he made in the game. When you saw some of these teams with lesser competition coming into Norman or going to Lincoln for Nebraska, those teams had some decent moments in the first quarter, in the first half of those games, and OU adjusted over time. And I like that. I also liked, the aggression, like we mentioned, going for it on fourth down, going for it, at the end of the half against Kansas, or the fake field goal against Texas. It didn't end up helping the Sooners in the long run, but I like the aggression. You don't typically see that from a defensive coach. So I love that that's the direction that he's got the program going in. Now, in regards to the talent, we can't ignore the defense completely in our midseason review. There's been some really bad things over the last couple of weeks, so we don't need to dwell on those necessarily, but is there a player or multiple players that you're looking at that you can say, yeah, this is a guy that can be a building block and something that we should be excited about going into 2023?
I think ideally in a perfect world with the right personnel, you'd like to build your defense from the inside out. That starts with elite defensive tackles, elite inside linebackers. And, unfortunately, I don't think that we have those guys on the defensive line right now. We're 7 weeks in. I think that that's fair to say at this point. So if I'm Brent Venables moving forward, not just for the back half of this season, but I think also moving into 2023, two guys that really stick out to me that you could kind of mold this thing around as being, the young, talented nucleus of this defense. For me, it starts with Billy Bowman, a guy that has been playing his best football in an Oklahoma uniform, at the start of this season. You could really tell a difference from the time that he went out after that kickoff return against TCU. From that point forward, the struggles in the secondary, the missed tackles, the miscommunications, the busted assignments. We didn't see that in the first 3 weeks. Now, again, is that a testament to them installing more wrinkles into the defense? Is that a testament to playing better competition? I don't know. It's probably a factor of all of it, but there's no doubt about it. When Billy Bowman's on the field, Oklahoma's playing their best football. And then second for me, I know he's struggled a little bit at times over the course of the year, especially with identifying what's going on in the backfield, maybe overthinking too much, chopping his feet, not flying from side to side, especially once we've gotten into Big 12 play. And for me, that's Danny Stutzman. I think, if you go back and you look at what Brent Venables and Ted Roof have said about this guy all the way from the preseason through his performances against Kent State and Nebraska. And, guys, I know he had a tough week against Texas, but going back and watching a little bit more of the Kansas game, Danny played extremely well, except for maybe a handful of plays. But I think that Billy Bowman and Danny Stutzman, those are two extremely talented guys, high football IQ individuals, and those are probably the two pillars that you should build this defense around moving forward.
Yeah, I think if you had to choose two, that'd probably be them. I think if you look at some of the younger guys, I think they're as a combined unit. I think they can be built around. Is there one particular guy that has all the tools and all the ability to build around one particular one? No. You look at a Robert Spears Jennings, or Mason Thomas, Jaron Kanik. Like, all of these guys have the potential to be that building block, but they just haven't shown it quite yet. Now, have they had the opportunity to? I think that's something we've discussed before. Maybe they should have more opportunity to prove that's them. But at the same time, I think those guys in particular, I think there's enough there where as a unit they can be built upon, but not quite there as far as just a single guy who individually can make that claim.
Yeah, I like Billy Bowman, and the reasons that you mentioned there, Tyler. For me, he's just too far away from the line of scrimmage. So I don't know that you can build your defense around the safety nearly as much. The cheetah position a little bit closer because that's going to roam a little bit more, but Deshaun White's gone after this year, so he's not a building block. Danny Stutzman, I think he's been solid this year, but I would have liked to have seen him take a bigger jump, and maybe we will see that as the season winds down. So then I'm left with, okay, like your defensive lineman, like no one there is making a difference. But the guy that I guess I'm most interested to watch over the next 5 games is R. Mason Thomas. What he's doing and the twitchiness and speed that he has is a lot more reminiscent of some of the elite pass rushers that we've seen. We haven't had a whole lot, but think Eric Stryker, think Obo Okoronkwo. I think those that's kind of the mold that he could become. He's
Benito.
doing what Reggie Grimes and Ethan Downs are trying to do, but he's just faster. So while those guys are trying to, turn the corner and get all the way around the tackle, they're really just getting pushed out of the play most of the time. But R. Mason Thomas is a guy that's actually beating the tackle to that spot and able to get around there. So he's going to get a lot of playing time. He was the guy that the coaches loved in the preseason. He played a lot early and often, then had some injuries that kind of held him back. So if he can develop into an elite pass rusher and get something consistent there, that helps this defense a ton. Again, we saw it again happen this past Saturday against Kansas, where Jason Bean was just tossing it right in between the linebackers and the safeties in that zone coverage. And that's because there's no one that's able to put any pressure on the quarterback. They have the ability to watch those intermediate and deep passes develop and just toss an easy one in there. So,
and I think that that's something, Adam, that gets kind of lost in the shuffle with a lot of the OU fan base. People want to sit there and they want to bash the play of the secondary or the linebackers anytime, a pass is given up over the middle. But at the same time, too, I don't care if you're Ohio State. I don't care if you're Alabama. I don't care if you're Georgia. I don't care if you're the New England Patriots. If you don't have a defensive line that can get pressure on the quarterback, it doesn't matter what the back end is doing. If you're going to give the opposing team's quarterback the ability to sit back there, he's going to pick you apart. So again, our Mason Thomas, I think that's a really, really good one. And moving forward, once he gets another summer with Schmidt, he is able to put on another 20 to 30 pounds, be able to utilize his skill set as a bigger man. There's your growth report for the evening. Our Mason Thomas, that's a really good one as well.
We asked Twitter, so make sure to follow us at the Mainline Pod. We asked Twitter to predict the record over the final 5 games for the Sooners. They play 3 games on the road, Iowa State, West Virginia, and Texas Tech, and then arguably the 2 tougher opponents at home in Baylor and Oklahoma State. The most popular response we got was probably 3-2. I liked Strubalicious Def, their response. I don't know what the name means, but I like it. He said, with the way we've played 3-2, we have the talent to go 5-0, though, which I think is a pretty fair statement. Where do you guys fall as far as the record the rest of the year, and where do you think any potential losses come from?
I don't feel good about Bedlam, if you want me to be honest. That one, I think, is the game I'm least confident in. Having Baylor at home helps. I think we'll learn a lot, guys. When we go up to Ames, I think we're going to learn a lot about how these last 5 games are going to go. I think this is a really, really, really good Iowa State defense, and we know OU doesn't have a good defense. And so, for the most part, Iowa State's been in these low-scoring games. So if you can go up to Ames and win, put yourself at 5-3, then all of a sudden you get Baylor at home. That's manageable. They're going to be a good test, but it's manageable. Baylor's not who we thought, or I guess who the majority of national media thought were at the beginning of the year. You would think West Virginia and Tech, those are winnable games as well. So to me, the only what I would consider for sure a loss at the moment is Bedlam. So if you look at it from that way, it's 4-1. At the same time, I don't trust this team enough to go 4-1 down the stretch. So I think it's more likely 3-2 or 2-3. And it just depends on which freaking team shows up in these Sooner uniforms each Saturday.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you as well, Corbin. At Iowa State, Baylor, at West Virginia, OSU, and then at Texas Tech to close out the year. I'm going 3-2 as well. I think that we're going to take 2 out of the 3 on the road, and then we're going to split the home games between Baylor and Oklahoma State. Iowa State is tricky. You always think about, coming off of a bye week. That's when you're supposed to play your best brand of football. That's when you're the most prepared. Iowa State's coming off of a loss to Texas where they honestly kind of got screwed. But they've got a bye week as well. So that's going to be a tricky game up in Ames here in 2 weeks. Baylor's a tough one. Blake Shapen, I don't think he's been quite as good as what a lot of people expected. And that includes Dave Aranda. The defense has been a little shaky at times. At West Virginia, JT Daniels, He's as likely to throw 5 interceptions as he is to throw 5 interceptions as he is to throw 5 touchdowns. So I don't know what I'm going to get out of that. Oklahoma historically has been good in Morgantown. OSU, I'm probably chalking that up as a loss right now. And then at Texas Tech, I hate to say it, Texas Tech at night to close out the season. That one scares me as well. So go 3-2 over the next 5 weeks, finish 7-5, go to a bowl game, win the bowl game, and have some good momentum going into next season. I think that after a 3-3 start, if you can figure out a way to go 7-5, get yourself to a bowl game, win it, I think that I know that that's not the expectation, but that's a salvageable season after what this ultimately could have turned out to be after losing 49-0 to Texas.
Is that Texas Tech game at night? I think we're just assuming that, right?
I think that
that hasn't come out yet.
Yeah, that hasn't come out, but
Yeah.
I think that the last 3 times we've been, it's all been at night. So
Yeah, I assume it will be at night. I actually have OU going 4-1 over the next 5. I think they go up to Ames, and I think they're able to take care of business there against Iowa State and create some real momentum. The 2 toughest opponents are in Norman. And so I think a lot of people look at that and go, okay, lose to those 2 teams, but those are home games. Like, that's still tough to come into Norman and play, even though it's not as tough as we would like it to be or as scary as some other venues around the country. That's still intimidating. Now, my loss actually comes
intimidated by that. Ask Iowa State, K-State if they're intimidated coming to Norman.
It's more so than when they go to, West Virginia or Waco or somewhere like that, I imagine.
Oklahoma State plays better in Norman than they do in Stillwater.
True. Yeah, we'll see.
I get your point, though.
Yeah, my loss is actually to Texas Tech, though. I just think that the road games are going to bite you at some point. I think OU finds a way to beat Baylor. We'll talk about Baylor in a moment and how that season has gone. Oklahoma State looking really good, but somewhat quietly, their defense is still really bad. So that could just be an absolute shootout of, hey, which quarterback's going to make the play? I know Tyler's come around. He thinks Spencer Sanders is a great quarterback, so you might disagree with me, but I'll take Dylan Gabriel in that particular matchup. And It's still Bedlam. It's still a series that OU owns and doesn't lose very many, games twice in a row in 2 years. So I think OU will find a way there. And maybe I'm just being, too much of an optimist, which I've been on this podcast, even through some of the dark weeks that we've had. But maybe I'm just choosing to believe. We'll see.
Well, first step to admitting you have a problem is admitting you have a problem. So I applaud you, Adam. You think that you take Gabriel over Sanders in a game tomorrow with both of them healthy? I can't believe I'm saying this, but I don't know if I'm there.
I just don't know how to respond to that after the way this podcast has gone over the last 2 years of arguing over Spencer Sanders and how much you hate him. But
I guess the reason why I'm saying that is I would have more confidence in Spencer Sanders going against this Oklahoma defense than I will against Gabriel.
That's fair.
Going against the Cowboys defense.
Yeah. I don't know if the defense matters. I would take Spencer Sanders right now.
All right. We'll see. We'll see how this plays out.
He's taller.
How the turntables.
There you go.